the things I always get people to think about in this realm is, if you've not thought about it yet, try to break it down by this modern workplace that we're shifting to as individual versus organizational. And that doesn't mean versus as a battle. I'm referring to the fact that some tools are very beneficial to the individual. Some tools will be implemented because organizational requirements or productivity needs are there. So Dimitri mentioned things like security or migrating telephony. We've also got organizational requirements around maybe document management or records management and workflow around business processes that have to be part of the ways that individuals are going to use and benefit from those tools. And a great example of that would be things like Power Platform, where we've now got tools like Power BI and Power Apps to really give the individuals new ways of using data. Could be I was working with a public sector company. They had lots of users that spent all day in housing areas, working with people that had housing issues and personal issues in their housing, social care. And they were literally going around making notes at every house they went to, and then at the end of the day using a laptop to try and fill it all the details in. And then the next day somebody would look at that data, and it would take 2 to 3 days to react to that initial issue with that house. Things like Power Apps changed that from a 2 to 3 day process to a 2 to 3 minute process, where they could literally tap on an app and fill the data in straight into 365. The organization now had business processes that then could react to it and initiate, for example, an emergency electrician or a plumber, or somebody could go in and fix, or a healthcare worker, etc. So individual versus organization means align the culture change, align that change management capabilities of this new software capabilities, and make sure you map it to who is going to be leveraging and using and benefiting from that piece of software, and where does that data need to go to benefit those different elements. And yes, it is, don't get me wrong, this is I made that sound like it was a 5-minute thing. It's not a 5-minute thing. It takes obviously planning and design and architecture and then implementation of the software to do that. But it's a lot easier to do today than it was, say, 10 years ago. That is the difference that we've got with this cloud world, is that we've now got many more opportunities to leverage tools that historically would have required a 6-month technical team and a design and change management process around, do we approve it, blah, blah, blah. We can actually do these things a lot quicker now because they are designed to work together from day one. As you can see by the magic wheel that we've got here, this is just purely to exemplify when we start looking at organizational tools versus individual tools. There are a lot of services and applications in the Microsoft 365 world that we can leverage. And depending on what we're trying to achieve determines which ones are considered immediate, which ones would be sort of middle term requirements, and which ones might be nice to haves. But either way, you need to be building that alignment to what we're currently doing, where we want to go, and what is going to be the impact to the business and the users by choosing that option. And if we're not going to use the Microsoft option, are we going to use a third-party vendor for that? And if so, how does that impact the integration with these other collaborative services? A lot of companies aren't looking at it this way. They're kind of trying to do it in a much more linear approach and forgetting some of these other services. As part of any culture change or a change management alignment to your current ways of working on premises to what you can do in 365, for some companies, it's going to be a big shift. It's a big shift to the business, the way it works, and it's a big shift to the users and the way they work. And if you try to do too much too quick, it can actually have a very negative impact on the success of that deployment and that change. So you really need to kind of think of that sort of user and personal impact as well as the business impact on those choices. Because we historically, and I've seen this many times in the SharePoint world, for example, where a company would not do these things. They would not think about these elements, and they would just deploy it, and the IT team would build it, and they'd build it in a way that they think it was needed. It wouldn't align to the way the business of the users could benefit from the tools. And of course, what then happened is nobody liked it. 3 years later, Microsoft would release a new version of SharePoint. So they'd just build another version, migrate the data, change it so that hopefully it works better for the users. But the users are now already turned off by this shift, and they become more resistant to change because they see change as being not something that works for them and never seems to help them. And the business then gets frustrated as well. So we know historically that change is met with resistance. And moving to 365 or cloud technology in general is a huge shift. And I often say this when I'm doing sessions at conferences, for example, where I make people think about the fact that today's cloud capabilities and what Microsoft has done with their cloud offerings today and where they are in what they're integrating and providing is the equivalent in a IT world as what email did for us in the 90s. That it is an evolution of the way we are using technology. And if anybody in the audience can remember back to the 90s when email came out, and you compare it to the way we used to work prior to email, and I was in the engineering world back then in the sort of late 80s, early 90s. I'm showing my age now, sorry. But in the engineering world back then, I mean, just the impact of CAD drawings on computers and the ability to email information and quotes and stuff around immediately and get 30,000 spare parts on an e-commerce system that they could order on a credit card and be shipped and delivered in a week instead of 6 weeks, letters of credit and all sorts of banking stuff. It was a massive technology shift in the way we worked back then. I see Microsoft's cloud model today as the same sort of fundamental shift of the way we can work as a business and the tools that we get. And if a business thinks about that in its change management storyline, it starts to make a lot more sense as how you can start planning it, and that you don't need to try and do it all in 5 minutes. You can actually do a strategy that's going to work for a long time. And if we think that email and file shares has been the fundamental methodology for 20 odd years with SharePoint kind of thrown in the middle, my thinking is that's the way we need to approach it today in a similar vein. And as Dimitri also mentioned, with Windows 10, with security, with collaboration, with all these tools now being invoked into your license, and the fact that you're shifting your on-premises management into cloud management, we are eventually going all into the cloud. And I don't mean this in a gambling effect. What I want you to think about here is you need to think as a business that we are not just going to go half in, half out. We're going to put some in and then we might just take it out if it doesn't work. If it doesn't work, we can just reset everything and start again like we used to do with servers in on premises. You can't do that in the cloud. It doesn't work that simply anymore because there is no reset button. There is no ability to build a new tenant and just redesign it the way you want it. So we need to do it right, and we need to do it right, even if it means taking baby steps to get there. And it might take several years before you're all in, before you start to shut off some of those legacy servers, because there are things and business processes that need to be fixed. And I get that. But you do need to have this long-term objective that if you are moving to cloud services, eventually you will be pretty much using that as your long-term platform. And that, yes, there will be companies that will be hybrid for many, many years. We know that. But eventually it will change, just like email changed us and SharePoint changed us on-prem.